Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to another episode of The Ways We Move. And today we're going to talk about, I should have changed the background to the AAM Master Class that you might have seen. I think about 2 weeks ago, I put out something there. Today, I wanted to bring in two good friends of mine who have been so helpful with the Advanced Air Mobility Master Class, and that is Rex Alexander and Clint Harper, along with Marilyn Smith, Professor Smith, who unfortunately couldn't be with us today, have taken the lead on this curriculum that I loosely put together in the very beginning. But these fine people here have been able to sculpt it to something that is definitely international and world class. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it because I know you guys have put a lot of work into it. I know I'm hounding you to get all the presentations going, and then of course then I forget to send you the template of the presentation, but we're working on that. It's at the end of the month. Tell us a little bit about how do you see this Advanced Air Mobility Master Class going? And it's something that, by the way, we've been talking about for at least a good year already. So I'm excited that it's finally happening.
No,
Who
thanks,
wants to
Nicholas.
take
I
it?
think one of the biggest challenges in today's environment when we talk about symposiums and seminars and workshops is, are you actually getting anything you can use? There's a lot of platitudes and feel good discussions on everything from one end of the spectrum to the other. So the goal in my mind is when people show up to this is to give them something that's worth the money. So my goal is when they walk in the doors to give them something that they can actually take back and use today and look at what is the safety parameters we're trying to build to. When we talk about standards, it's like, well, you may have a minimum standard, but what's the optimum output? So we have to kind of make a cost benefit analysis and then look at the safety factors. And we're talking vertical aviation to a certain point on airports. And there is a difference between vertical aviation and traditional airplanes. And you have to take that into account when you're designing infrastructure that's going to coexist in harmony. So those are some of the things I'm looking at, is making sure that I give them tangible information that they can act upon today.
That's a great point, Rex, because that's something that maybe I didn't make very clear. Is this AAM Master Class is specifically geared for airport officials who are
Mhm.
not necessarily the most well versed when it comes to vertical flight. So that's a very good point you made there, Rex. Clint, what's your take on all of what we're doing here?
Well, something that I really appreciate about the team on your side of the table, is that you've essentially given us, the flexibility to really express, our expertise and bring, our experience, to the table and getting away from a lot of the buzzword soup and buzzword salad, that exists out there with a lot of the other curriculums that we see and some of the other programming, that's around, some of this stuff. That's out there. Then there's a lot of cool stuff that's emerging. And Rex talked about some of that stuff. But is that workable and is that doable, is usable in the near term, for airports and for existing infrastructure operators? And I think, in my experience, the answer is, yeah, we'd like to get there one day, but we're still working with technology that's, if we're lucky, it's back in the early 2000s, and so how do we get that infrastructure, in that framework, to work with AAM as it exists today? So I think what you've set up and what you've crafted allows us to speak to that, in a very real sense. And I'm looking forward to that, and talking about, using our experiences and showing, how we can take existing infrastructure, existing processes, existing, whatever, and showing how, that can accommodate advanced air mobility. And you don't need, all the buzzword salad, to make it work, to make the future happen today.
Yeah, and I want to thank you for that feedback because it's something that I think we've all talked about that, at least for the last year, if not more, is how many times do we want to hear the same people deliver the same speeches over? It's been years, and yes, we know, we get it, it's fun, but it's not necessarily what I want to hear about. And there are only a few events that I really do like and I go to because then we get down into the weeds, the underlining, the infrastructure side of all of this and everything. I want to share some feedback that we've been getting, and it really was heartwarming for me. And I'm going to paraphrase it, but wow, what a fully well complementary curriculum you guys have designed. You've covered everything. And this, by the way, is coming from airport officials. This is coming from AAM OEMs that will be present. So I'm pretty excited to hear that because that's the one thing I wanted to say. Like you said, Rex, I want these airport officials, and as we all know, pretty much, at least my interaction with airports is half of them, yeah, I kind of think it's hype, whatever. You can't really talk to these people just yet. You will. But the other half are, yes, we're thinking about it. We don't know how to go about it. And usually they say we don't learn anything at events short of what companies are doing with their well-funded pockets, but we're not there. We don't have well-funded pockets. So we really wanted to give them that experience, give them your practical knowledge and everything. And that's why also I think all of us have sort of scratched our heads the last few years going, wow, a lot of chat GPT experts going out there talking to big rooms of people, but it's like, okay, and you and what army are going to do what now? So I wanted to highlight that. And also another thing too is to also explain to people what we did too is we wanted to make it available to all kinds of different brains out there. Now, I'm a very visual person. I need to see, and I'm tactile. I don't just learn by listening. So I wanted to also make sure we have a very theoretical part where we bring in all the data and everything. So of course, Professor Smith, Adam Cohen, even Olaf Bunk in Munich are going to show us the numbers, the research, the data. But then I also wanted to bring in, well, what is the practice around that? What does that mean? And of course, you guys are the experts when it comes to that. And of course, that leads to the very last one where hopefully everything comes together, the workshops. And then hopefully, ideally, I'm still putting the fine tweaks on how it will work. But morning we'll have a theoretical module, and then a practical module, and then a workshop, and then the same thing in the afternoon. And this is a stretch over 2 days. So just wanted to hear your thoughts on all of that. What do you guys think so far? I think we're moving pretty well, by the way, all things considered.
No, I think it's shaping up pretty nicely. I think the workshop's good because if you can get several people to do a kind of a group think and work together, it's always amazing how much more learning goes on during that particular time. And then,
Yes.
Give them the tools, then let's see how they apply the tools. When we do the heliport evaluation course, it's always interesting when people walk in the door on day one, we ask them, hey, do you think we could put a heliport out there? And we'd point to a field. So yeah, no problem. Then after they go through the course, what do you think about putting a, it's like, I don't know. It's like, it doesn't fit this parameter. It doesn't fit that parameter. It doesn't have this clear airspace. It doesn't. So it's once you get those tools, all of a sudden the lens you're looking through has changed. And that's kind of what we're looking for, is to give them the tools. Now they're looking through the right lens when it comes to vertical flight.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with, well, let me think of a way to frame this, but anyways, with the AI experts, that are out there, there's a lot out there on AI, but AI, of course, is only as good as the information that it's been fed. And I'll just be, critical of a lot of, what I've seen coming out of AI with respect to vertical lift operations and things of that nature. It hasn't been fed very good information. And it's not AI's fault. Let's not blame AI. And I, and I'm one of those people that always uses please and thank you whenever I interact with AI. So when Skynet takes over, I'm on the good side. But it's just, there's not a lot of historical data that's been collected, that's been fed into that. There's not a lot, just vertical lift operations isn't, the main thing that, within aviation circles that are talked about or shared about, in the mainstream right now, and so because of that, there's just not a lot of strong, data that's fed into a lot of the AI models out there. And so I see, one of the red flags that I see out there, that's kind of evolved and gotten better over time, but it's still out there. I'll see LinkedIn articles or some reports out there that talk about, like, in order for AAM to be a reality, communities must do this, or airports must do this, and they're putting it on the airport saying, if you want this, if you want, X, Y, Z economic impact, then you must do this. The airports, especially large international airports, are already doing pretty well, and so what is the incentive to must do this? And so how do we integrate this in and start growing it, in a more pragmatic way? So when we look at, new and emerging technologies, disruptive technologies, it's never flipping the switch off of the old and turning the switch on the new and then just enjoying things as if the old never existed. There's always that iterative transition cycle of moving from the old to the new and having the old and the new coexisting and trying to extract the benefits out of both, and that's the challenge that we're in right now, is how do we bring all of it to the table together and do it in a safe, efficient, and economical manner.
I'm so glad you brought in the AI aspect of it, because I did shy away from bringing an AI expert, because there are a lot of out there, and it's true, AI can make coffee. I have no doubt about that. I'm still one of those who says thank you. You're right, because I use it as a tool. It's a darn good tool, at least for me. It helps me rationalize my thoughts. It's a great editor. I mean, it does a lot of these wonderful things. But I do also have access to some of the top AI people in the world, not necessarily in aviation, but some of them have an aviation background, and I've always asked them the same question. When do you think AI will be able to predict air traffic, to predict the energy challenges that we need to meet at these airports, vertiports, multiports, and flow of everything, passenger, everything, without human intervention? And most of them agree not before 2075. So I was like, okay, well, that gives us a pretty good groundwork to look forward to. So then the question becomes, who has a good platform where they intelligently use AI as the tool to go through the data, bring up all the relevant stuff, but still have a bunch of humans who will say yes, no, yes, no, yes, no. And that's the trick, and that's the thing I didn't really find yet. Perhaps next time on our next Advanced Air Mobility Masterclass, which will be, I'm not going to say it yet, we're still working on it, but it's going to be another international airport. But perhaps then we will have an AI expert who might be able to come in that. But it's hard to find someone who understands the importance of the quality of the data and what's going on out there. And very quickly, one of my friends said that the next 2 years, we're going to put out more AI-driven content than we've ever had since the digitalization of our society, and most of it is going to be, I'm sorry, crap. So it was really interesting to hear that. I was like, wow. I mean, think about how a lot of people are using AI these days, right? I want to get it to work, not to figure out if this is a good movie to see. Or I like using it for that too. But anyway, so I thought that was interesting. But yeah, I wanted to thank you guys, because you've done a heck of a great job, and we have now about 3 weeks left. I can't believe it's finally upon us, and we're working on the next iteration too. So anything else you'd like to add to what we're doing here?
No, I think some of the things I'm going to kind of point to in one of the discussions is what are the standards and regulations, and kind of go down that road of all the different ones that are out there, which ones are being utilized. I think it was interesting. I did a deep dive on the difference between Federal Aviation Administration here in the U.S. and ICAO criteria.
Yes.
And ICAO actually does speak to safety management systems in infrastructure. However, they don't talk to it except in Chapter 6 of the ICAO criteria, which is fire safety. So there's still a gap in ICAO when it comes to safety management applications for the entire infrastructure piece. And when we talk vertical lift in the US, there's a complete gap that we still need to fill.
Yeah.
That's true. We just recorded a whole session and we touched on that. That's correct. Yes. Clint?
Well, yeah, and I think even with that, what frustrates me sometimes also is we get like these really great foundational things that become a cornerstone of what we do, like safety management systems. And then they also become, buzzwords, which become someone's get rich quick scheme, and so now we got these safety management systems, intersecting all these different other parts of solutions, and they really don't know what a safety management system is, or they've overcomplicated it and made it so expensive for, someone to adopt, where they're like, all right, well, we can't afford a safety management system. Like, well, you can't afford to identify your risk, to qualify or quantify your risk, or track your risk. I mean, it doesn't need to be, super complicated, to implement, a safety management structure or risk management practices into what you're doing, but we've tended to, overcomplicate and create things. I shared something with Rex where, now outwash and downwash, is a very critical issue, safety critical issue that we're trying to dig into and understand better, but it's become a buzzword. And, we saw, an advertisement of someone now offering, infrastructure development who's taking into consideration AI and outwash and downwash. And they're talking about how they're solving the problems and solving the issues. But then you go to their website and look at the renderings that they've put on there. Yeah, they may be solving for for outwash and downwash, but they've ignored every other safety critical issue that exists in infrastructure out there, and what they're doing by placing their infrastructure down in these tunnels that just are ridiculous, or having obstructions existing all around, their safety areas or within their safety areas. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot that, that we're going to shed some light, I guess, on the reality light on, and get back to the basics and show how this
Yes.
stuff doesn't have to be a black box. It kind of comes back to some just very basic foundational things that don't have to be overcomplicated or turned into buzzword get rich quick schemes.
Yeah,
That reminds me of the story. The old saying, "You may be a redneck if." I was like, it may be a novel idea if your expert only has artist renditions on their website.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I know when people point me to their websites and I see a CAD rendering, and I'm like, oh, okay, all right, okay. What kind of real life stuff that do you have there?
Show me some real world. Yeah, show me some real world experience and application here. Stop designing stuff in a CAD program and saying it's, oh yeah, this is great, it works. I said, no, you defied 3 laws of physics. No, it doesn't.
I also have to say something that, and this is something that people might not know, is I'm very proud of how we are behaving, because up until last year we were very, very diplomatic and very nice and trying to not, ruffle up feathers and everything. I think these days we haven't completely removed the gloves, right? But my God, they're definitely a little bit sharper and the slaps are going around here. But I think it's also important. I mean, we are getting at an inflection point where, safety is paramount. That's the first thing in our mind, last thing on our mind of the day. And we need to be really careful with that. And also, I don't think we have any more time to spend on great ideas or novel ideas, as we like to call them, because it's just it's disingenuous for the people. And I'm also very excited to see, by the way, a bunch of new companies recentering their business model around the human being, which is ultimately what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to make people fly, make their lives easier, more efficient, so on and so forth. So I'm excited about what's happening right now. So I'm hoping there's a bit of a sobering wind that's coming back into our industry. But I wanted to thank you guys for taking on this challenge, because it's not easy getting as 5, 6, 7 people to come on board and to draft something that we look forward repeating every year. And by the way, at some point, I think it's going to be semi-yearly. So and excited to go all around the world. Oh, very quickly, I forgot to mention, we do have a lot of good news though. We have well over 30 airports that have either expressed interest or coming or something like that, with multiple representatives, and about close to 30 companies that are going to be coming or are coming. So we've actually are meeting our quota, and always interested in hearing from more people who would like to attend. No, it's not going to be online. It's going to be an in-person event, because we want to talk to people. We want them to see what's going on, and we want these workshops to be as interactive as possible. Perhaps one day we will make it online. But any final thoughts, any final words before we conclude this?
You called it sobering, but it actually gets me more excited, because, the more we start talking about the realities of all this, it means the closer we are to actually this all becoming a reality. So the more we start talking about realistic things, the closer we are to getting reality. And that gets me excited about this industry.
Yeah, that's a very good point. When you're overly excited, there's a problem. When you are happy and you're moving towards something, that's when you finally hit that groove. I find in my life, at least. But yeah, absolutely. Alrighty, gentlemen, we'll see you. Well, we'll see each other again soon enough, but we'll hope to see all of you out there end of September 23rd, 24, at the International Airport of Rome. And this is also co-hosted by Urban V. We will have a lot of speakers. We'll have a lot of modules, a lot of great workshops. We look forward to any questions you may have about this event. There's still time to sign up, and we'll have all the information out here. But in the meantime, I wanted to thank Rex and Clint, and also Marilyn, who unfortunately couldn't be with us, because you guys have taken the lead, and you've really made this AAM Masterclass the success that I was hoping it would be. And I look forward to many, many, many more years of good content, quality content for all these individuals and executives out there.
Nope, it's been a pleasure.
Yep.
All right, we'll see you soon again. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.